Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to a very special edition of the MrWarrenHayes Show. It's one of those where it happens once in a blue moon and you get excited. I'm excited. I'm really excited today because this special edition of the MrWarrenHayes Show is going to be a PWI Women's 100 reveal show, where we're going to be talking about the PWI Women's 100. I'm super stoked for it. It's been a list that I've been looking forward to, and I'm going to be talking about it, bringing some scoops, some newsies to you, a few reveals here, alongside Kevin McElvaney, who is the editor-in-chief of Pro Wrestling Illustrated. Kevin, thank you very much for being here, and welcome to the MrWarrenHayes Show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about the Women's 100. This has been excited to talk about it for weeks, but couldn't say anything until now. So.
I know. We've been working on this for a while as well, and I was like, I can't wait to start. This is good stuff. This is great stuff. Of course, this comes off the heels of another top 500, which was again very successful. But the women's list, Kevin, doesn't have the history, let's put it that way, as the top 500. Why talk about the history a bit? Why did PWI decide to do a list for women specifically?
So as you mentioned, it doesn't have the history that the PWI 500 does. The PWI 500 dates back to 1991, who our former publisher and editor-in-chief, Stu Sachs, who I replaced earlier this year, came up with the idea for that list, which is really, it's every single year without fail, the most talked about issue that we have. But
Sure.
In recent years, the Women's 100 is right up there, and similarly looked forward to. Some people look forward to it more. And the reason we started this list, the 500 list was not exclusively meant, at least when it was started, to be a men's list. However, in different years, it has been referred to as the top 500 men in the sport. Women have been ranked in the list throughout the years, but essentially there wasn't the wealth of women's wrestling back in the early to mid 1990s that there is today.
Sure.
No one can argue that. There were certainly some very exciting things going on, particularly in Japan, but it would have been tough to compile a list of 500 women wrestlers back then. So it really it wasn't a consideration. And I can say that despite not being with the magazine at the time. I was too young. But it just was not a consideration. 2008, that changed. So women's wrestling started to get a lot more prominent, not just because of what WWE was doing, but really, a lot of credit has to go to TNA's Knockouts division at the time. Mm-hmm. In addition to, you have wrestling in Japan, but also on the independence scene, you had Shimmer. A lot of other places were starting to spring up where there was this just very athletic, scientific, just classic women's wrestling. And there was no way to ignore that. It had to be acknowledged somehow. So the way that PWI decided to do that was by creating this separate list, which was called at the time the Female 50, which was a kind of an awkward name for it. Regrettable in
going for the alliteration, right?
Exactly. Yeah. But the list itself was great. It's, 50 top women in the sport of professional wrestling. And over the years, that grew into a list of 100, and today it's known as the Women's 100. And I can tell you, and anyone who worked on this year's list can tell you, it was very hard to whittle that down to 100 names this year. Most competitive list we've had to date. Even
Really?
During COVID-19, it has never been more difficult to cut off the rest of the names and say, this is our 100 and there's not going to be anybody else.
Tell us about the selection process. Undoubtedly very, very difficult. Tell us a bit about the selection process. What was your criteria, essentially?
Right. So, a lot of times I'm tempted to describe this off the top of my head, but I'm just going to read it off the page because I can tell you what actually goes into it, but I would like to read the terms. So if it sounds like I'm reading from a teleprompter, I am in this particular case. Fair. So championships won, but I'll elaborate on that and say it's not just championships. We consider things like, for example, tournaments, winning a tournament or getting to the finals of a tournament.
Right.
We consider certain big matches. So the Women's Royal Rumble is a prominent example there. Second criteria is quality of opposition. So essentially, that's the people who these women have stepped into the ring with, defeated, or at least, really gone toe to toe with. The third is technical proficiency, which I think is pretty self-explanatory. That's in-ring ability. So that could be classic mat wrestling, aerial ability, power moves. I mean, it's all taken into consideration, but
Sure.
the quality of the in-ring work from a technical standpoint. After that, win-loss records. So we do put a lot of emphasis as a magazine that comes very much from the kayfabe era originally. I mean, we still hold on to aspects of that, and win-loss records, for better and worse, do figure heavily into a ranking. But one cool thing about that is it does recognize when someone has had a really good year, and sometimes even doesn't necessarily have a lot of championships to show for it, but they've won a lot of big matches, and that should be recognized. The next criteria for that is the overall activity. So if someone is more active, generally they're going to fare better on this list. Now this year it's a little bit, as it was with the PWI 500, a little bit different, because you have COVID-19 limiting the participation of a lot of the wrestlers. We have typically a minimum requirement of either 20 matches over the course of the 12-month period that we evaluate on, or competing in 7 different months throughout that period, because some places just the people are not wrestling as often, but they'll wrestle these big matches periodically. So we consider that. If someone was clearly on track to complete the activity requirement this time out, we were a little bit flexible with that, again, because COVID-19 happened. And then the final thing, which sort of feeds into the championships and the win-loss records, is momentum and promotional push. So that's if someone is prominent in a wrestling promotion, but not necessarily always winning a match. So I'm actually having a hard time thinking about that, who would epitomize this in this year's Women's 100, but an example in the 500 list is someone like a Baron Corbin, whose win-loss record is very poor, but he's consistently one of the top heels in WWE. So someone like that in the Women's 100 could potentially qualify on those bases, and they have in the past. But this year, it's, again, so competitive that there was less of that. And those are the criteria. So simple.
Well, it's simple, he says. And it's crazy because you do mention the impact that COVID had on your selections, but then at the same time you'll tell me, oh, this is the most competitive list we've ever had. So imagine if those 6 to 7 months that are sort of lost now to time. Imagine if we had those as well to evaluate, and then add that into the thought process, into the selection process. Would have been crazy. So before we get into some reveals here, if you're watching this on YouTube right now, give the video a like, a thumbs up. That would be appreciated. Share it out. That's always cool. And if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast application, thank you very much. Why don't you give it a review? I mean, you're gonna find something you're gonna like here. For sure. I'm pretty sure this is going to be a thumbs up video for you. Kevin, let's go right ahead. We're going to start talking about the top 5 women of the list. And I think I'm going to group them all together because there's a theme here. The top 5, starting at number 5. Let's go from there. Number 5 is Sasha Banks. Number 4 is Charlotte Flair. Number 3, Asuka. Number 2, Becky Lynch, and the number 1 woman, of the top 100, PWI top 100, Bailey is at number 1. Now, we can talk about all of these women individually, of course, and because they're all fantastic, but the glaring thing here, the theme, the top 5 is all WWE women. Kevin, how come?
I mean, WWE has done a great job of promoting, at least at the high end of the card, its women wrestlers this year. I mean, there's no two ways about it. And I will say, even last year, 4 out of the top 5 were WWE. So WWE has made some great strides in recent years. Women competing in main event matches, big marquee matches, huge, just months long feuds. And really, I mean, some of the best television period that WWE and any wrestling promotion has put forward. I don't see how anybody from any kind of objective standpoint could argue. And I mean, it would be hard to argue anything else was better. Really.
And they've been running matches all year at the same time. Like
exactly.
WWE hasn't stopped.
Right. And again, we did give some flexibility with this, but if you look at what WWE has done, not only have these women and Becky Lynch, who's at number 2, and we'll probably get a little more specific in the why people are where they are in the top 5.
Sure.
But her side and Charlotte, toward the end of the evaluation period aside, the top 5, they were all, when nothing else was going on, when a lot of wrestlers were not even coming to the tapings, were for various, reasonable justifications for that.
Sure.
They were, I mean, carrying the show. There's really no other way to put it. Just entertaining week in, week out, putting on these amazing matches. You had 3 in particular out of this top 5 being Bailey, Sasha, and Asuka. I mean, essentially on all 3 brands. And I mean, and Charlotte too, certainly too, before she stepped away for a break. And that's unreal. You don't see anybody else doing that. I mean, to that kind of coverage and influence anywhere else in the wrestling business right now. And that's pretty amazing.
It is amazing. Kind of like Bailey's year has been amazing. I don't think it's hard to argue Bailey at number 1. My God, what a year she's had. She won the SmackDown title in October 2019. She's held on to it since then. She's the longest reigning SmackDown champion. She and Sasha re-won the tag straps this year. I mean, it's hot. And this, look, coming from a guy who was a complete Bailey mark in NXT, where I was like, this is just like everyone would say, I bought into it. I was like, you've got your female John Cena here, folks. People are just lapping her up. They love her. They decide to turn her heel. And I'm like, what is wrong with you people? But look at her doing the best work that she's done on main since being called up just this year. I mean, it's hard to argue Bailey at number 1, right, Kevin?
Yeah, 100%. And I'm right with you there because someone who had been following Bailey's work, of course, for years. I mean, I was there when she won the NXT Women's Championship the first time. Amazing moment. And I was skeptical when she turned heel. I thought, okay, that's interesting. Not that it could have never happened, but it seemed early to do that because I thought she still had some ground left to cover as a babyface, but has just been an incredible wrestling villain, and Sasha right there alongside her. And despite her being ranked number 5, and we'll get into Sasha more, I'm sure.
Sure.
Had she held a championship the way Bailey had and been unquestionably kayfabe, for lack of a better word, the number 1 person on a roster, I mean, they would have been neck and neck from an entertainment standpoint, from being the focus of a promotion standpoint. I think if there were one completely merged list this year and we were ranking everybody against everybody, I think Bailey would be right up there, potentially outranking, a Jon Moxley if we had one combined list. She has had just such an incredible year. And there was, unlike with the 500, there was not a ton of debate, but there was a little bit of debate about who would be number 1. There was really no pushback against that. Who else could have possibly been number 1 this year? Bailey. I mean, she had the title the entire time, the tag title multiple occasions. She has just been incredible. Easy number 1.
At number 2, we have Becky Lynch, who again had a great start. I mean, she is who she is now, but the man decided to go become the mom, and relinquished her title to Asuka. Up at number 2, despite not being around all that much, but I mean, it's hard to her contributions are very, very clear, aren't they?
Yeah. So I think one person, had Becky continued to do what she was doing and had, continued to be active at that level throughout the evaluation period, which, just to reiterate here, it's October 1st, 2019 to September 30th, 2019. Had she stuck around the entire time, I mean, I think just by virtue of what she was doing, would have very much been in the mix for the number one spot. But even still, she just had an incredible run through that time. She was the most popular competitor on Raw. She never lost to the women's title. She relinquished it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So that's a lot of credit to her. Yeah, there was a little bit of back and forth about, should she stay there or should we maybe consider Charlotte or Asuka to be in that number 2 spot? But if you look at it on paper, the wins and losses, particularly against those two competitors, I mean, she just consistently was beating those two, and had a much longer title reign at that. So, I mean, if you add Asuka's tag title reign and her world title reign, and you put those together, that's a little bit different. But as it stood, I mean, as a singles champion, as the face of a roster and a company, really hard to argue with Becky at number 2.
Asuka comes in at number 3, as we mentioned. She's done some fantastic work in this era as well. Once WWE lost 2 of the 4 horsewomen, she was put in that position, and she's been delivering. She started delivering when she was in her tag team with Kairi Sane as the Kabuki Warriors, with their insane Japanese promos, and she's just been an absolute delight. One of the MVPs, really, of the COVID era, if we're going to call it that, the Performance Center era of WWE. She's still currently the Raw Women's Champion as we're talking about this, as we're recording this right now. Yeah, I mean, she's been a part of what carried the company to a degree.
Absolutely. And again, just ticks all the boxes. She certainly, for a little while there as a tag team champion, those titles have gained some prestige in recent months. Some people looked at it as a little bit of a demotion with her being a tag wrestler. I mean, her rating suffered a little bit last year, but she and Kairi really elevated those belts. And then, I mean, as you mentioned, the promos, I mean, I believe Al Castle mentions in his write-up for Asuka that just the intensity of her promos, I mean, he doesn't understand a word of Japanese, but it's just like, they're just so intense and convincing, and you don't have to know what she's saying to understand what she's meaning. So just very, very good. After she regained the women's championship, we did have a discussion. Okay, does this, because we tentatively had her at number 3, does she overtake Becky? But just a little bit too much on the wrong side of the 500 record in matches against Becky. But I mean, real close. Real close.
Charlotte Flair comes in at number 4. So she had the first part of the year, right up till WrestleMania, was incredible. She, like you mentioned earlier, she was all over the place. She was on every brand. She was the NXT Women's Champion. Had a great match at WrestleMania. Who knows what would have happened if she would have stuck around as well.
Yeah, and she was actually on the cover a couple of months ago for PWI. I mean, just on the basis of the incredible year that she'd had, and accomplished so much. And I think had she stuck around a little bit longer, again, she's right up there in the mix. And it's just, again, speaks so much to the quality of competition in WWE that any other year she could have been a number 1 ranked wrestler based on this year. And she's number 4, and it feels right because, again, it's so competitive.
Sasha Banks is in at number 5 to round up our top 5. Again, You mentioned it a little earlier. Had she held a title, I mean, she did hold a title, but the Banks curse continues on. She can't hang on to a singles title for the life of her. God bless her. But that being said, I love Sasha. I love this idea that she's unable to hang on to a singles title. I think it's a great long-term story. That being said, if she had, because she was doing great work. I love heel Sasha Banks. She and Bailey played off of each other magnificently. They understand the value of long-term storytelling as well. All the little Easter eggs that they drop as their angle proceeded, because everyone knew that it was going to end with a fight between the two best friends. I think it makes sense that she rounds up the top 5.
Yeah, absolutely. So I should put this up front. Sasha Banks and PWI have a little bit of a tumultuous relationship, which I've alluded to in our newsletter, our email newsletter before, because we did not rank her number one in the 2014 or 2015 list.
Okay.
Nikki Bella was number one that year because that was the year that Nikki Bella was just, just huge.
Sure.
Personally, and I had zero say over the list that year. I was just a lowly contributing writer. I campaigned pretty hard for her to be number one. On a personal level, just one of my favorite wrestlers to watch. You probably can't see it in the background. There's a little Sasha Banks figurine on my desk. Huge fan. So Sasha, if you're hearing this, I hope one of these years we can put you in the number one spot. But these criteria are obviously we have a committee who's doing this, and we're human beings, and we interpret things the way we interpret it. So cases could always be made, but I think it would be hard to put her over Bailey as being the number one this year, just simply based on the fact that she didn't hold on to that title, that she won it on a sort of a fluke count out, just from a storyline perspective. But as an athlete, as an entertaining presence, I mean, like, there's almost nobody better than her in the whole wrestling business. And you have a hard time, again, arguing that. So I think, even within weeks of us putting this issue out and talking about this, you could very well see her be the champion again. And I think it's just a matter of time. It's really just how long they drag this out. But I will say, and this is certainly a cheap plug here, in the next issue, the issue that we're announcing right now, the Women's 100 issue, there is the Achievement Awards ballot. So every year we have the year-end awards. One of the top contenders for that has to be the Bailey-Sasha Banks feud for Feud of the Year.
Sure.
And if you pick up the issue digitally or physically, you can vote on that. And these votes, I can tell you, like, we're legitimately sitting and tallying every single one. Stu Sachs did it last year. I was writing doing the write-ups for it, and Stu, like, where are these tallies? He said, the deadline didn't happen yet. You need to wait until it looks like this person's going to be number one. And then by the time, the voting actually closed, I wrote an entry about this person was the first runner-up for no reason. Because we really do go that down to the wire, and we really do count these votes. So I think, Sasha Bailey feud has to be a strong favorite to be Feud of the Year.
Well, I mean, not to spoil. Not to spoil too much. We're on the verge here, and I did get the chance to look at the magazine. Your cover tells the story. The cover of the magazine. Can we talk about it? Can we?
Yeah. I think when this is out, we'll have also revealed the cover on Twitter, and you can again go to our website. You can pre-order print copy. Digital copy should be coming this morning. But yeah, the cover. Please go ahead. I cut you off.
Because no, that's fine. I just wanted to make absolutely sure, because we didn't talk about it beforehand. But the cover of the magazine is Sasha and Bailey sort of at odds with each other in fighting poses. I mean, if that doesn't define WWE this year,
Right.
Honestly, Kevin, I don't think there was a better feud, a more interesting, compelling build-up, or even before it became a full-blown feud. The relationship. I don't think there was anyone that was more compelling, entertaining, consistently good, pouring out great matches than those two women and whoever they were fighting with.
Absolutely. And I mean, in Bailey, we have an interview with Bailey inside this issue, and she talks about that. I mean, it's no secret that these two are, in real life, they're very good friends. And they've been on both sides of this. Of course, Bailey was the babyface in NXT, and Sasha was this, ruthless, mean heel. Mm-hmm. And now the roles are reversed, and they're just knocking it out of the park. And the pressure's kind of on, because they had these two, actually their Iron Man match, the 30-minute Iron Man match from TakeOver in 2015, was the first women's match to be voted match of the year in the PWI Achievement Awards.
There you go.
The runner-up that year was their match from TakeOver Brooklyn, where Bailey won the title. So, I mean, that is exceedingly rare for the same two wrestlers to be in the top position and the first runner-up position. So there's this pressure on them to deliver again. But yeah, I mean, she talks about that pressure. She talks about just everything that's gone into this, and I mean, it was really cool to see how she felt about this. So it's exciting. It's great for us to cover it as journalists, but I mean, just as fans, I mean, it's great to sit back and watch it.
I agree.
Yeah.
Let's break out of the top 5. Let's start. Let's
Yeah.
break down a little more the top 10. At number 6, we have AEW World's Women's Champion Hikaru Shida, or at least again at the time of recording, she still is champion. It's hard to argue. I really believe that Shida is the best all-around wrestler that they have in the company. She won the title at Double or Nothing last year against well, not last year, I had Double or Nothing against Nyla Rose. She's had a great run, had a fantastic defense at All Out against Thunder Rosa as well. Makes natural sense to me that she ends up so high up on the list as well.
Yeah, I think without a doubt she has had the best year overall for AEW's women's division. The title reign, which now is record setting, I guess it's overcome. I believe as of the end of the evaluation period, she had not eclipsed Riho, but she has now. But certainly even before that, she was just putting on great matches, incredibly entertaining, charismatic. And I mean, she's been doing this all year. If she ticks all the boxes, technical ability, she's quality of competition, composition. Maybe she's, I know she plays piano. Maybe she's writing some songs as well. So, but quality of competition is certainly there. She is, I mean, the win-loss record. I mean, before she even beat Nyla Rose for that championship, she just had this incredible, I think she'd lost one match all year or something up to that point. So, I mean, really just from all angles, she deserves this spot. I think, you know, in a scenario where a little bit more emphasis were placed on AEW's women's division, where these were main events more often, when these matches had a little more time on the card, I think you could have seen her in breaking up that dominance WWE had in the top 5. But, I mean, again, no secret, AEW could do a little better at promoting its women's division, especially with the incredible talent they have there. Yeah. But it's, you know, it is a process. And I'm hopeful that this time next year we could see an AEW women's wrestler breaking up WWE's dominance in the top 5. Not because I have anything against WWE's women's division, but because I want to see new and exciting things happen. I don't want to have the same list next year.
Variety is good. Variety is good. Mixing things up. Tessa Blanchard is number 7. Yes. I mean, she's had a fantastic year. If you want to take, you know, as far as her wrestling accomplishments go, she broke out of the knockouts division. She's been fighting men throughout the better part of the year. Had her legendary win over Sami Callihan at Hard to Kill to become the first woman to hold the Impact championship. She defended it once, then disappeared. It was
right.
It was removed from her. I mean, look. Talk to us about Kevin. Yes, Kevin. Talk to us about Tessa. We can talk about Kevin later, of course. But talk to us about Tessa. It's a balancing act as far as Tessa Blanchard goes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think had her year had it proceeded on the way it seemed like it was going to go, she would have been up near. I mean, number 7 is still great.
Very good.
I mean, especially considering, like you said, this anticlimactic ending to our run in Impact. Her capturing the heavyweight championship there was a huge deal. Even before that, she was competing in the X division. She was competing in the women's division. She was competing, I believe her matches in Mexico where she was faring well were still within the evaluation period, if on the earlier side. Some prominent indie appearances. She had the Warrior Wrestling Women's Championship until recently. But yeah, this whole thing where, I mean, her championship win was shrouded in controversy due to these allegations against her of bullying behavior and alleged racist behavior. And then, you know, she still captured the championship, but her actual reign, she had essentially one defense. And then, you know, part of this is certainly the COVID shutdown. But even before that, I mean, she wasn't on TV defending the belt every week in the way that, say, Eddie Edwards just was. You know, so I think they could have gone a long way by positioning her strong right afterward, just having her come out and be this fighting champion, as opposed to being in these tag matches and things like that. I understand the wanting to build to something bigger, but that would have probably gone a long way. And then, of course, with her not being able to come to these terms with Impact at the end of her contract period, and then being stripped of the title, that really does diminish the in-ring accomplishments. Which is a shame, because objectively, I know, even despite her having this controversial year, it was a big moment for a lot of women wrestling fans to see this, and it was inspirational nonetheless. So
a big statement by Impact too, as far as
absolutely
intergender wrestling goes. It was a big statement.
And I think, even now, I mean, as we're discussing this week's Impact hasn't aired yet, but you had recently, Jordan Grace is in the hunt for the X Division championship. And, it's, to me, it shows they're willing to go to that well again, which I think is great. I think breaking down these barriers makes a lot of sense. You already see it on the independent scene, and you're going to see more of it near the top of the card. But yeah, I think, still number 7 is still pretty impressive. So that shouldn't be too much of a knock, but had things gone differently this year, yeah, she would have been higher, of course.
Number 8 is Riho, the diminutive AEW Women's Champion, former AEW World's Women's Champion. She won. She was the first. Won straight out the bat at the first Dynamite against Nyla Rose. Held the title for a little over 4 months, if I'm not mistaken. Again, this was one where travel got very, very strange. Where. Yeah, she held it for 4 months, but a lot of people were calling her Little Brock Lesnar because she wasn't around to defend the title much. But she did win the title in a 4-way against Nyla, Shida, and Britt Baker. She's had defenses against Emi Sakura, Statlander.
Yeah.
I mean, I think as just within the accomplishment of being the first AEW World Women's Championship champion, I think it's a top 10 deal for sure.
Yeah, and I think the circumstances under which she won that, and at the time, even though the division fell out of prominence, it felt like a big deal when she won it. Yes. I believe it was the main event of that show, but if it wasn't technically the main event, it at least had a good deal of time devoted to it. So it felt like a big deal. Of course, she's back in Japan now, and she's competing there, and she continued to compete there in the early part of the year before the shutdown. So that has to be taken into consideration as well. Had she been around to defend the championship more, could she have been in the number 6 spot that Shida is? Possibly. But you could have also had some different things happen where she may have lost the title sooner, or maybe even, Shida got her break sooner. Sure. We'll never know.
Io Shirai is number 9, widely regarded. I know in the magazine you say that she's one of the best female talents on the NXT roster. There's a lot of people who just say she's one of the best talents in the world, male or female. And she's bested. She won against Tegan Nox, Dakota Kai. She won a 6-woman ladder match as well. She's had an objectively very, very good year. Tell us about the number 9 spot for Mrs. Evil.
So I think had she worn the title for more of the evaluation period, had that win over Charlotte come a little earlier, for example, she could be a little bit higher. But she has been this cornerstone of NXT. And as you mentioned, it's not just great year for a female talent. I'm always a little bit hesitant when that language comes across my desk as an editor, whether I keep it in or tweak it or what. But
it wasn't a knock, by the way.
No. But I am conscious of that, because we just want to acknowledge greatness. But at the same time, she is, we're doing this women's 100 list, and a lot of the emphasis, because this was created as a way to recognize women's wrestling, especially where there's a lack of opportunity. Mm-hmm. Her position within one of the most prominent women's divisions in the world, and how she has stood out and made it such a big deal. So I think in this particular case, absolutely one of the best women's wrestlers in the world, one of the best wrestlers in the world, period. And she had a great year, and I think she's gonna continue to do well. I would, if she keeps at the pace she's going now, I could see her easily being in the top 10 again next year.
And rounding out our top 10 this year, Mayu Iwatani, which is going to make a lot of my Joshi pals really, really happy. I mean, listen, her year has been just, it's a litany of accomplishments. Second run with the World of Stardom Championship. She's beat Jungle Kiona. She's beaten Momo, Kagetsu, beat Priestley. I mean, it just goes on and on. It goes on and on. And man, Mayu is such a centerpiece for Stardom. By God, this woman can go. Personally, I'm glad that she's in the top 10. I think she highly deserves it, Kevin.
Yeah, and I think this is another situation where had the shutdown that occurred in the pandemic, you could have seen her be even higher. I mean, she was number 16 last year, and then up to actually I have that wrong. She was number 9 last year, so she was down slightly. But you have the situation. No, I was right. Number 16. I misread my own numbers that I have here in my notes. But she was on pace to have this amazing year, and I think, you know, had she had the chance to have, you know, you could argue that she could have lost the championship. I think she would have held on to it. I mean, we've seen she's back in action now, and she's retained the title since the end of this evaluation period. But also, she's traveled a lot in the past. You know, she's wrestled for Pro Wrestling E, for Ring of Honor, all these different places where she conceivably could have gone again, and I think had even more influence domestically in the United States. So I think, given the shutdown and given everything else that happened, for her to be in the top 10 is still very impressive.
I agree. You know, when you look at the top 10, you've got 4 women out of the top 10 who come from Joshi background.
Yes.
Right? You have Mayu, you have Io, Hikaru Shida, and Rio. That's something, right? I mean, sure, a lot of them are making their name on North American soil now, but it's really telling I think, to the popularity. Maybe are we getting a little more acceptance of the Joshi style on our northern shores, where we're used to seeing big meaty men hitting each other?
I think absolutely. You have on this list, actually, and if you add Asuka into the mix, you have half of the top 10 who began careers in Japan. So I think there's this acceptance, but also growing influence, and this recognition that you have all these wrestlers in the United States who may be American born, maybe they were from the UK or Australia, who they've taken so much influence and so much stylistically from this Joshi wrestling scene. And I think you're going to continue to see that. I think you're going to see more people be signed by these big American promotions, by WWE, by AEW, but I think you're also going to see the growth of these promotions internationally. I mean, you have Stardom, which under the same banner as New Japan, you know, so there can be a lot of cross promotion there. There's already been a limited amount of it. And then you have Tokyo Joshi Pro in Japan as well, which under the same banner as Pro Wrestling Noah and DDT. So you have this opportunity for fans to see these wrestlers that they might not have before, thanks to these streaming platforms and these big events that are held internationally. And it's just, as a fan of wrestling, it's really cool to have this expansion. And years ago, the kind of thing you could only really seen if you were a tape trader, you know?
Right.
And
yeah, exactly.
It's so accessible now. And I mean, I think that's good for everybody, and most of all the fans.
If we talk about a few other standards, we're not going to go through the entire list, of course, you know.
We'll be here all day, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, there are a couple of things, a couple of standouts. NWA, right? Despite, again, the company in itself having a bizarre year because of COVID, that's putting it mildly. 2 of the women broke into the top 25. That's what I'm trying to say. Thunder Rosa at number 14 and Allison Kay at 25. Interesting fact: Thunder Rosa was at 97 last year. Yeah. Kevin, talk about an ascension. My God.
So I think there's a couple of things at work there. The first is that she's just had this amazing year, and she's broken out with the NWA Women's Championship with these appearances on AEW, which were very late in the evaluation period. She was slated to do well even before that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, that just solidified it. So you have that. You have her growing influence, her big wins. I mean, she also Tokyo Joshi International Princess Championship until recently as well. And I mean, she was stripped of it because she can't travel to Japan to defend it. But it is in part a testament to her accomplishments this year. But I mean, it's also just we're looking at the list a little bit differently. This list was really the baby of Dan Murphy, who was a senior writer with PWI for 2 decades. Some great innovations, including, again, coming up with this list and executing it every single year. I didn't always agree with Dan on everything, as I mentioned, the Nikki Bella, Sasha Banks debacle of a few years back, but I understood why he made the choices that he did. I still think in the case of Thunder Rosa, she was a little too low last year. I mean, she should have, in my opinion, at least been in the top 50. And that would be, I'd probably have her a little higher than that. But this year we had and this is a testament to the work that Dan did, because he was doing this all more or less by himself. And we had to assemble a committee this year because I didn't want any one person being burdened with making the wrong or right choices. So we have Al Castle, who's a senior writer for PWI and host of the PWI podcast, cheap plug. We invited Pat LaPrade, who was the co-writer of Sisterhood of the Square Circle with Dan Murphy and has done loads of other things. He helps us with our weekly women's ratings, which are also printed as the monthly women's ratings in our magazine. We invited Kristen Ashley, who and she is with Bell to Bell. She is the co-founder of that site and just does some amazing work over there. And she offered her services when we were talking about the role of gender in the PWI 500 and the Women's 100. She said, I want to help with this somehow. What can I do? And I said, I was beforehand, even before you mentioned that, I was thinking we need to get some new blood in here to help out with these ratings. And I think you'd be great for it. And she has been incredibly enthusiastic. I'm sure we're going to talk more about the work she specifically has been doing before this interview is over, because it's, well, I don't want to spoil too much yet. And then we also had Andrea Hanks, who is editor over for pro wrestling over at Sportskeeda, has worked with a lot of different websites and has recently started working with PWI. Even prior to this, she contributed to our 500 list, writing up some of the bios for that. So, the 5 of us got together. I mean, we burned the midnight oil, and we actually completed the first draft of this list. Emphasis on first draft. It had to be revised a few times in a single night. And then, as things occurred in the weeks after that and changes happened, I mean, we shuffled around the rankings a little bit, but by the time we met, I mean, it really was at least pretty clear where things were going. And it was a process, but it was a great one. And I'm really grateful to the whole committee for getting together and assisting with that, and then for their work in writing the entries afterwards. So it's was really an experience. And I realized I forget where we even started with this. So did this start with Thunder Rosa? Yeah. So, I mean, all of us agreed that she was robbed last year, essentially. But then on top of that, she, has just done so much this year. And I think, Allison Kay, who has been a staple of the list going back many years, just had an incredible year as well, both in NWA and outside of it on the independent circuit. Yeah. And both are very deserving of being in the top 25.
We've been talking a lot about WWE women, of course, and so on and so forth. And, outside of Tessa, we haven't talked much about Impact women, but don't worry, they're there. There's a lot of them. I think the story here is how much a lot of them have risen in the ranks. Jordan Grace is up to number 12 from 26 last year. Kimberly was at 90 last year. She's at 19 this year. Deanna is at 30. She didn't wrestle for most of the year. Kylie Ray's at 19. I mean, there's the Impact Women's division is to me it always feels like a group effort, and it seems to come across here as well in the rankings. all the women have risen in the ranks. They're all following each other. Like, I didn't even mention Taya, but
I was just about to say she'll be upset. So let's get her.
Sorry, Taya.
Number 17.
Number 17.
But yeah, no, I agree. I have said previously, and I'll say it again. I don't think there is a televised wrestling promotion in the U.S. in North America right now that has a stronger women's division overall than Impact. And just the fact that there's only one Impact wrestler who has now left the company in the top 10 really only says so much about WWE's prominence and what a great job they did locking up those top 5 spots, because you could just as easily look at any of these Impact wrestlers who have had these great years and slot them up pretty high as well. And I think in the absence of WWE presenting its women's titles as the centerpiece of the show for all those months, you would have seen a few more of the knockouts in the top 10. So kudos to them, and I think you're just going to see them continue to fare really well in this list every year.
I agree. We were talking about it before coming on the air. The number 50 spot is basically the halfway spot, the moment that you're sort of like, well, the top 50 is considered like the elite, for lack of a better word. And number 50 is Laney Luck, who cracks in right there. I mean, this is a woman who I feel like throughout the evaluation period, her stock has just been rising. I think she's been wrestling around more and more. Currently, again, at the time of recording, Zelo Pro Women's Champion. She's just been working so much, so hard. I'm not surprised that she cracked the top 50, and she might even be higher next year.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this is really, again, an unconventional year. She was sidelined for a few months, and unlike some of the other women on this list, she didn't have so many opportunities to go and compete in, undercard matches on I don't believe she had anything on AEW Dark, but if she did, it was early. Whereas some of the independent women on this list had a few more of those opportunities, but she just did so much before then. And then again, since wrestling has started to resume on the independent scene. And I mean, on top of, we do place more emphasis for the purpose of this list on women's titles, but it's also worth noting she won the freelance underground independent title. And I believe still has that as well. I believe retained it over the weekend at the Collective, which is, that's, anybody can compete for that. That's all genders title. So she's been a really big deal on the Midwest independent circuit, and increasingly people are getting to know her name nationally and internationally. And I think, her stock's going to keep going up. I'd be surprised if she was not also in the top 50 next year.
A shocker for me this year, Kevin, I'm not going to lie. Priscilla Kelly is charting at number 38. But for the first time on the list, Kevin.
Yeah, so I mean, again, this is a situation where there are 100 spots. We try our best to get this right. We don't always get it right. But yeah, that was surprising to me too. I thought for sure she would have been on the list at some point in the past, and I believe in preparation for some of the ancillary projects that I keep teasing that Kristen Ashley has been
we're getting there
on hard at work on, and you've could assisted with as well. Kristen Ashley asked me, is this Priscilla Kelly's first year? Has she ranked before? I can't find any record of it. And I said, surely she must have ranked some, but off the top of my head, I don't know. So let me look into it. And, sure enough, she hasn't been on the list before. I will say this is her biggest year so far. Yeah. She's a lot more prominent. I mean, last year she was viral sensation, but as far as like in-ring and accomplishments, and I mean, she just, I don't know if you saw that match that she had on Primetime Live a few weeks ago with Thunder Rosa. It was incredible. One of the best matches I saw all year. And no excuses for her not being on before this.
No,
but she's here now, and
she's been on AEW. She had that, that angle on MLW with the Spider Lady. Angle. Yeah, it's like, she's done a lot. So I'm glad to see her there. But you know, I mean, again, I don't want to take you to task here, Kevin.
No, go ahead, please.
But
it's the only way we learn.
Listen, 38 women on the list this year who weren't, who are charting for the first time. 38, okay? And again, I'm not going to run down the entire list, okay? I'm not, because
Is it 38 for the first time or just 38 who did not chart last year?
38 who didn't chart last year. But okay. I mean, look, you got Big Swole, you got Faye Jackson, you have Julia, you have, which I'm sure, again, a lot of people are going to be happy to hear, Session Moth Martina, Kevin. I mean, those are just a few.
Right.
Yeah, defend this.
I cannot. I swear. So I know for a fact at least a couple of the women who you just listed have not been on the list at all, period. I think a couple others have ranked in the past but didn't last year. But even then, yeah, it's kind of perplexing. I am sure that Dan Murphy had good reasons for it at the time not to bury him. But I mean, you look at this next year, people are going to say, well, why wasn't so-and-so on the list? Sure. And I'm even already looking at it. I'm like, why wasn't this person on the list? And you know what? There will be validity to that. And I think if we were to have Dan on right now, what he would say is, well, who would you take off the list to put this person on there? And ultimately, when we had to cut this off at 100, because we could list honorable mentions all day, and there are plenty of people who deserve it, but you know, who do we cut to make room for those people? And that's honestly it. And it's not a knock against anybody's work to not be on this list. It's I understand why people feel upset or disrespected by it, but it's certainly not our intention. We're just trying to honor those who have done well, and I mean, we're doing our best, folks. So.
Sure, of course. No, of course. I was just joking around, of course, because I don't think I could pull this stuff off. I don't think I could sit down and come up with a top 100 list. And that being said, I mean, on the flip side, you can look at this in another way as well. Look at how rich the world of women's wrestling is right now. Look how thriving it is. If we're at a position where we're like, my God, why wasn't Killer Kelly on the list last year? If this is what we're doing now, to me, that's a good sign. That's a very, very, very good sign. And it's maybe eventually you'll have to do a 200 for the women or a 500.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, and that to me is one of the, and we're still considering this idea of, well, why isn't it just one list? Because you can evaluate people side by side based on saying this person had a good year, this person had a good year. Right.
Yeah.
Already we're cutting so many people out of the 100 for the women's list. We're cutting so many people out of the 500 for the other list. And it's just getting more and more competitive. When they first started this list, the PWI 500, never for a second, never mind the female 50 list, the original one, because I'm not sure how difficult Dan Murphy felt that to compile. But I do know that the original PWI 500, there were some wrestlers on there who weren't even competing anymore. I mean, they had a hard time filling out that list.
Right.
And today, I mean, there are some people who are never going to get ranked on it who put out great work. And, you know, that's not meant to be disrespectful. It's just that there are so many great wrestlers out there.
There really are.
And I think it says a lot about the quality of women's wrestling out there and the perception among fans of women's wrestling, which is in part credit. Like, promotions are finally saying, hey, you know what, we're going to present this respectfully and as important in the way that we should have been doing this entire time. But then, I mean, really, it's that the women are so great and that they're undeniable, and you can't keep them down. So it's a good indication. It's a good indication of what's to come. Couldn't agree more.
So we talked about it. We've got a couple of, so the magazine is coming out. You can start the digital issue will be released today at some point. You'll even be able to pre-order your own copy of the print edition as well. So that's exciting. And where exactly can people start picking this up, Kevin?
So best thing to do would be to head over to PWI-online.com. We'll have the link. Actually, when this goes up, we'll have the pre-order link for the issue. We'll also be sharing links on our Twitter account and our Facebook account. Twitter is at official PWI. The Facebook handle is longer, and it's actually escaping me, which is terrible, but you can search for it and you'll find it. Pro Wrestling Illustrated. And we'll have the links to purchase the digital edition as soon as it's available. We'll have the print pre-order link as well. So I would say pwi-online.com, or you can click over to us on social media and we'll have everything you need right there.
And we I'm very thrilled this year because yes, we did get to do the reveal here on the show, and that's very, very exciting. And I can't thank you enough, Kevin, for agreeing to do this. It was a great partnership, and I mean, this partnership went on a little further as well because, as we mentioned, Kristen Ashley over at Bell to Bells, who was on the committee, also managed to get a bunch of interviews with over 20 women who ranked this year on the list. I was even able to collaborate on a few for some video and audio interviews as well. We've got some written interviews. I'm very, very proud to have been part of this whole project. So keep an eye over on belltobells.com. That's BELLTOBELLTOBELLES. I don't know why it slipped my mind.
I think it's JEFFJAII.
Oh, we're gonna break into song in a minute here, but head on over there or follow Bell to Bells on Twitter, and of course you can keep an eye out on my own account here, because I'll be tweeting that stuff out. But it's all going to be happening over on Bell to Bells. Got some exciting stuff. I don't want to spoil who we've got coming because there's some nice surprises coming up. But I can tell you this much: first interview that we're going to release was Session Moth Martina, and what a delight it was. It was a great interview. Hope you guys check it out.
Would you describe it as Bants?
No, it wasn't. I can't. It did not achieve Bant's level, but it was wonderful. It was wonderful to talk to her nonetheless. It was great. That'll be the first interview available on Bell to Bell, so you might as well just head on over to the YouTube channel and subscribe, or find it on your favorite podcast application as well. And I really do appreciate tremendously having the opportunity to be the launch pad for this, Kevin, this morning. Can't tell you how much it means to me. This is a great project. It means a lot to me. You know, listeners of the MrWarrenHayes show know I have a soft spot for women's wrestling. So this is all natural, and I'm very, very proud to have been able to start off the festivities for the Women's 100 this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
And there's the other thing. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to come and talk about it as well, Kevin. Y'all heard where to get the magazine, the digital copy, the print one. Just go out there and get it. It's going to be a big deal. There's, of course, all sorts of articles in there as well. It's not just a list. It's a full-blown magazine. All sorts of great stuff there. So make sure you check that out. And I want to thank everyone for watching this morning. If you tuned in here on youtube.com/MrWarrenHayes, or if you're listening on your podcast app, thank you so much. Go out there, talk about it. Let us know in the comments. Who do you think should have ranked, or higher, lower? Let us know. Let's have a discussion. Just keep it civil. Just for fun. Kevin, thank you again for joining me this morning. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next time.